but great fun to teach, but hard. Because of that idea that I said that people know the story. But also because trying to work out quite why he's doing this is difficult.
Yeah.
And the way it's told is a bit more complex than I think, well, I mean, you know, but it's that sense that what Utterson is doing with his cousin, and then the whole idea at the end, I mean, the wonderful moment where he's at the window and he changes, and then when they break the door down and it suddenly gets even stranger, because what you don't see is chaos, you see neat notes and a kettle, and you think, what the hell's going on here, you know? So that it almost, in some senses, it's not that it's not hard to put those examples in, and I think when you're teaching it, examples, the use of example will be, you know, the stepping stone. But for an undergraduate, you're saying, okay, here's the stepping stones, but they kind of get lost in what's the overall theory. But teaching the text, not the theory, is probably easier. But it's a thing where you always wanted to go to the end. And even I've done exactly the same in quoting him at the end, partly because I want to show that he's unreliable. And also, if we had more time on it, I would say, okay, but actually this is also interesting. Particularly Utterson and his cousin. And the opening, he says he loves going to the theatre. He hasn't been to the theatre for 20 years. So I said, why not? What's your problem, you know? But I have found it, I think, harder to teach than you might think. I mean, I'd be interested to, you know, at one point, you ever have a chance to say, you know, it'd be interesting to know, because you think it's going to be, this is going to sound terrible, really juicy to teach. You know, there's so much that you can, and then when you comes to it, sometimes I think it's that those examples aren't really picked up and used as much as I'd want them to be. It's my feeling, and I'm always happy to be proved wrong. But I hope that's not your experience, but I guess your experience would be very different when you teach it.
Yeah. Well, I haven't started it yet. It's the language that worries me most.
I would say that's probably the thing. And I think I've read a lot of 19th century fiction, and you just forget, with Shakespeare, if you read a lot, you forget how impenetrable the language is.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's, how would you get around that?
I don't know. I've started doing science fiction with year 8. So I decided that War of the Worlds would be a good idea. And because I like it.
Which is the best reason to do it.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like, I like this a lot. You're going to love it, guys. Yeah. And I it's so, and it's honestly, my frame of reference is very limited to 6 weeks. But it's so interesting how quickly I could tell it wasn't really, there was no affinity in the class with the text at all.
Sure.
The boys thought, just not feeling it, just not feeling it at all. And it's because the language is very dense. I just wasn't thinking about it. I just wasn't seeing it in those terms. I should have done. It just hadn't occurred to me.
And then I know you're not alone, because I've done that in different classes as well, thinking that it's normal or natural that certain phrases would make sense. I guess it's almost an act of translation.
Yeah.
And picking up keywords, isn't it, I suppose?
It's a mixture of that and tuning their ear in. So you're listening. So you're listening to it, because the tone gives us, we forget how much of our communication is tone and context.
Sure.
And so and we have to do this with Shakespeare as well, and so it's going in through the theme to the language, rather than going through the language to look at the themes.
Yeah.
So you have to look at the themes first,
Sure.
and then get the tone,
Yeah.
so that they know it's scary, or they know it's weird, and therefore the language suddenly becomes from this to this much language. It's just the words that are about that, and so that helps you to define and get to the understanding, and then absolutely, you have to translate certain words.
But you see, what's interesting about using Shakespeare, what you've just said, I would have thought that's exactly what a director would say to an actor, which is not, you know the text, probably, or you should, but here's the meaning or the thematic emphasis of the text. And a really good Shakespearean actor, any man or woman, is going to emphasize certain words so that you, the audience, I always think the Globe guys do this really well, but the others, Royal Shakespeare as well, but the sense in which they're naturalizing it and they're emphasizing one word or two words and they're pausing. And that works a lot, maybe 6 out of 10 times, you think, I get that. Because I'm not thinking, first of all, I'm having to interpret it, but also I'm hearing it. But I wonder if something like this is harder, partly because the chopping Victorians had such complex sentence structures.
Yeah, I think you have to come away from the sentence structure. So you have to go, you have to pick out the quotes and almost get rid of them. To be able to get to the quote that you actually want to use, and that they don't feel in 6 weeks they have to be able to read every single word in that text. It's just too much.
Yeah.
So almost something like that, I don't know if you can even see that well.
Yes.
That's a sentence, but if you got a student to write that in their essay, too many subclauses.
So clausing.
Yeah. So
sometimes I think it's when it comes to you reading it to them, because when they're reading it, they see all the words and they see all the clauses. And I found with blooming I Captured the Castle, how simple is that? But they're so, the wall of the words kills them.
Yes, okay.
And with nothing, I say, okay, I'm going to read this bit, and you just sit and listen.
That's interesting.
And they're much better at visualising by saying than
Hugely.
looking at the
You've
words.
got to lift the words off the page when there's that many words and there's that many clauses. But also you've got to then get them to think about, be explicit about the fact that there are that many clauses. Why? What was going? Why? Why do they speak like that? So then again, they can dissect the way it's written and think about that, which is good for their language. But also it makes them feel less stupid, because the point is that it is convoluted and it would be to anyone. So in the modern fiction, modern writing, so that again makes them feel, oh, it's normal. Not to be to be able to just grasp this really.
Do you think it would be really scandalous to edit in? I mean, not as an overall text, but if you're sitting in a classroom, do you think if you took out some of the sub-clauses, that would be?
You certainly would if you were going to look, if you were then going to just do a plot summary, for instance.
Sure.
You could do a quote summary of the plot, so sometimes you just take quotes from different parts of the plot and put them as a summary of the whole text, and then you would just take sections
But
out.
almost to make sense, if you take that out, I mean, that's still convoluted, but that as, taking out the first sub-clause.
Yeah, I think what you could do is when you've read it, you just pick out the different bits and you say, well, what does this bit mean?
Yeah.
You ignore the rest. So you would do that editing in the way that you then say to them, so what do you think they mean by a certain impatient gaiety of disposition? What's a disposition? So that's what you
I've kind of done that by italicising it.
Yeah.
Not for the same audience, mainly because I want that bit stands out to me personally. I want that bit. But yeah, I mean, certainly undergraduates, I mean, maybe all of us in this room, when we first encountered the style, it's slightly convoluted. Dickens also could be, I mean, very convoluted at times. The irony of Great Expectations, it seems to be one of his clearest, most concise texts, but I'm certain that the students you teach won't think that. That's so big.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. Just the length of the text.
Yeah.
Whereas Jekyll and Hyde is quite manageable because the chapters are very short as well.
But I wonder if actually Jekyll and Hyde is too short in that sense.
Not for teaching.
No? Okay.
There's no text that is too short when you've got to teach in year 10 class.
Yes, I'm sure.
Sure.
So because it's also, it gives you lots of scope to go to go into the thing and the context, which is so important. And the fact that the language is so dense, is that in itself is what you look at when you're analysing the language.
Yes, of course. I mean, I suppose it's all an exercise in spotting what bits you need or should or could talk about, rather than thinking isn't one of our skills saying this is relevant, this bit's the bit, and in that sense we're gatekeepers, and that it's something I don't even think about anymore. I'm confident as a reader, but if I step back, I might think, oh well, actually we've missed. I don't think, oh that's not the right bit. I think about all the other bits we haven't looked at, and that's if you teach for a bit on a particular text, it can just become the 10 close reading segments, and then once in a while you reread it and think, oh my god, or go to see Macbeth and think, I don't remember this bit, and that's because that's not the bit you've gone back to, you know. Who's got time to reread if you're busy and doing tons of hours and stuff? But I mean, that can be fascinating, I think.
Well, and then you have that contrast, because it either becomes about the story, and I think they're very comfortable naturally at having discussions about the story.
Yeah.
But then when you have to pin things to the text,
Yes.
when I struggle, but I found myself for year 12, I'm doing The Great Gatsby, and I thought, yay, this is so cool.
Sure.
There's just so much in the text to look at and build from, and you just can see that they're just not used to going from down up.
Yeah.
They're used to coming from up
Sure.
down. And Jekyll and Hyde seems a bit more of a down up. You know, if you, as you say, you know the story, and if you get stuck with the story bit, you're actually going to miss.
I think, I mean, that point that I made between story and plot is something that we struggle with each year, to mark essays on Jekyll and Hyde. I'm sure it will happen again. It's not to negate the writing of undergraduates, it's more just to say that story takes over. And I wonder if it does for me as well. And it's not that they won't be very engaged with plot, but sometimes the story just completely dominates in ways that maybe it doesn't. I mean, wouldn't it great expectations? Because Dickens, by the very nature of what he's doing, is putting out a knotted piece of string you might find in a drawer. Because what you're not meant to do in the novel with the secret is page 2, realise what's going on. You know, but I don't think it's that hard if you even don't know the story to realise that they're similar. And also, as I've said, it seems so simple and so silly almost, but the cover's going to tell you. You know, last time I said that to a group, they said, I listened to it on audiobook. I was like, okay, fine, but look at the cover of the audio. Oh, it was on an iPod or I was like, okay, but you take my point, you know. That was quite funny. It's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. Well, then it got into a discussion of was it in different voices? You know, was Jekyll and Hyde? But then Jekyll doesn't speak, really. And just as, and this is so significant for Frankenstein, the creature does speak. You know, but you know, were there any Jekyll-ish noises? Dracula doesn't. You know, that's again a Gothic trope that rarely does the fantastical get a voice. It's just there. You know. Have any of you tried to teach Great Expectations? This point.
I was going to. They told me that I was going to do Great Expectations with my year 8 class, and then they told me actually it's science fiction. I'm like, that's a bit of a change. And I was like, right, so what is it?
I think that's what happens in teaching an awful lot. It's like you really ready to go, and then they go, actually.
So that was why I had this genius idea to do more of the world. So they said, like, well, I've done 19th century context. I've got 19th century context and sci-fi, 19th century sci-fi. War of the Worlds my only option.
Yes.
As far as I was concerned.
Sure.
So yeah, that's why.
I still think it's a good choice. I mean.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy it. Actually, the more you talk about it, the more I feel like it might be a Gothic text in lots of ways.
Oh, it's an ad. I mean, what's fascinating, first of all, is you don't think of sci-fi as being Victorian.
No,
But they
right.
kind of invented it. But I think it's offshoots. You know, so those aliens, I don't remember War of the Worlds so well, except, of course, the rather wonderful 1970s recreation.
Jeff Wayne.
Yeah. But, yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I haven't used that yet, I'm going.
But so, I think that's Arnold of it, isn't it?
Oh, yeah? Yeah, Liam Neeson directing it. Sorry.
But the idea of the particular, you know, the alien is the outsider, the alien is the invader. Yeah,
it's like uncanny. It's about automator and slithery things, and
Totally.
like, you know, these Gothic nighttime scenes with lightning flashing and.
So it's really open. You know, the term Gothic shouldn't be seen as like, oh, it's got to be controlled. If you're going to the late 18th century novel, there's quite specific parameters. But almost immediately, the kind of Gothic that we're talking about is very much moves out into crime fiction, sci-fi, fantasy narrative, you know. And even within, I mean, Wuthering Heights is a perfect example. Wuthering Heights is wonderfully, perfectly realistic up to a point. Nothing really happens in that book that could not be described in, I don't know, any society, whatever. But it's the way she tells it that's so fascinating. I mean, God, aren't all Yorkshiremen Heathcliffs stereotypically, you know? But it's not that, it's the way she plays with it, so. It's fascinating to think of also the newness of the style of a 19th century text to a young person's eyes. And that may be one of the issues, style-wise, you know. If I'm teaching a Shakespeare class, if I have the chance to, in an ideal world, if you could take them to 3 plays and not have them worry about any kind of assessment, after that, them listening to, as if you were learning French or German, instead of sitting and worrying about vocab, you just listen to it and you pick up things, and then you begin. But you can't say to them, read War of the Worlds and, I don't know, read I don't know, Great Expectations and then read something else, and then we'll begin, because that's impossible. But I think that sense of familiarity and listening is exactly what you're saying. How do we do for time? Do you want me to stop or carry on? Just tell me.
No, you've got about 20 minutes. It's just that, I mean, this is great.
Is that okay, guys? I don't want to talk your heads off.
No problem.
Do you want to hear my really, really dark Great Expectations? This is a bit like, I don't want to ruin it for you. But first of all, I really love Dickens, so I'm not trying to criticize him. And actually, rather beautifully, his great-granddaughter is the literary fellow in the English department. And she's a really lovely woman. She's a writer. She's published a book on friends of her great-great-grandfather. And the fact is, he was, it's a Cameron. Okay, he was a bastard, sorry. He wasn't a nice man to his wife. He left his wife, I mean, this is, I think, Ralph Fiennes has just made a movie.
Yeah, like last year.
Okay, last year, yeah.
Where about his affair with a much younger woman.
That's right. Which is Jenny Uglow's book, The Invisible Woman, which I think might be the title of the... Okay. I mean, first of all, so he leaves and lives with this actress who was actually a really lovely person. He fell in love with her, he didn't divorce his wife, but he resented what he called his wife's materialism, which is, I think, partly, he was really, really not nice to her. Catherine was treated badly. The point being, well, 2 points. One, is that relevant to the book? Not really at all. But I think it's important to say that this is, for our purposes, to know it's his midlife crisis novel. He leaves his home. I think he wrote most of it over a pub in Wapping. It's hard to know exactly where he wrote it, but it's definitely something that is very much about his own crisis of not so much just who he was, but also a crisis of materialism, which is partly what's happening in the mid-19th century as well. The Victorians were fascinated by sex, but they were also fascinated by money. But they always had something that Dickens himself really, really seriously had, almost as a traumatic thing. He always thought he was going to go broke, because his father had, and the debtor's prison, he worked in a blacking factory as a child because his family had gone into debtor's prison in the Marshalsea, which is down the back of Borough Market. All the roads around there are now named as Dickens characters, which in itself is fascinating. But he'd had this very deep trauma. And in fact, he wasn't working that long in the factory, possibly 6 weeks, but he says it could have been a year, could have been more, and it's like, oh, come on, right? But the point is, it's not that he's lying, it's that for him, a trauma doesn't matter how long it is. It upsets you, And the reason I'm mentioning it is this. When he wrote about it, he gave a little bit of his autobiography to his biographer, John Forster, who then published it. And John Forster himself says, this isn't quite true. He says, my mother never came to see me. My mother wanted me to do this. And so he directs explicitly this experience of working in the blacking house, which is down in Covent Garden. It's now a TGI Fridays. Which is, I've never been to one, but I think it's like a kid's, I don't know, it's like a family restaurant, isn't it?
Yeah. But I mean, I'm thinking of them left over from the 80s.
Yeah, it must be the only one in London. But it's just so funny because you see little Dickens there almost in your head going, I see him as a weight, it was silly. But the point is that mothers in Great Expectations are treated badly. They're treated really awfully. Mrs. Joe, beaten into brain damage and then dies from the wounds of a leg iron. And the leg iron is so important for his narrative with Magwitch because he steals food for Magwitch, but he also steals a file. And then the file comes back when he's meets the convict in the pub. So, just in terms of, to finish the Dickens, the autobiographical narrative, is that